Today's game was developed by Reflections Interactive and released in June 1999. In just over a month, it surpassed 1 million units sold, solidifying it as a commercial success. It was received very well on release, garnering average scores of around 8.5 to 9 out of 10. This is Driver, the demon love child of destruction derbies and a 1978 crime movie called The Driver. Referring to the original PlayStation version, IGN stated, "In the history of driving games for PlayStation, there's nothing that comes close to the comprehensive, deep, and thoroughly pleasurable experience that's embedded deep in the heart of Driver." The people at Game Revolution were equally impressed, saying that Driver excels where other games have failed by striking a perfect balance between action and realism. Car handling is a wonderful mixture of true physics and arcade functionality, not as nitpicky or sim-oriented as Gran Turismo, nor as ridiculously implausible as San Francisco Rush. GameSpot had a less than stellar opinion on the game, saying, "Driver is a game that might be mediocre in its presentation, but more than makes up for it with its gameplay and concept." I don't know if it's the age of the game or what, but I feel like my experience with Driver was vastly different from that of the reviewers. Maybe because Driver 2 was my first experience with the franchise and I'm kinda regressing? In any case, let's dive right in, shall we? Does anyone remember Driver? So let's jump right in by going over the story. We play as the torpid conglomeration of pixels that is John Tanner, an NYPD detective and ex-racing driver tasked with going undercover to infiltrate a crime syndicate led by Castaldi. This will take you through 4 cities where you take jobs from a handful of contacts within the organization. And that's pretty much it. There's no platforming, there's no shootout missions, no health or armor packs, no stealing new cars, none of that. The focus is on the driving and only the driving. Which is okay, but one thing I'll be saying a lot in this video is that Driver lacks dynamics. The gameplay loop is as follows: check answering machine, choose job, drive, complete job, repeat. But before we get too far in, I feel the need to address the elephant in the room, the tutorial. And holy shit, I tell you, when I was a kid, I could never beat this part. As a matter of fact, I thought this was the whole game. When I went to get footage for this video, I got completely embroiled in a grudge match with this damn tutorial that lasted well over an hour and a half. Why is it so difficult? Hardly any of this shit is necessary to beat the game. As long as you know how to brake, steer, and accelerate, you'll be just fine. And I get it, they wanted to show off the driving mechanics and physics, which granted, were pretty good for the time, but fuck me, why couldn't they make this tutorial optional? Oh, and that reverse 180, I hate it to death. I don't even want to talk about how much I hate it, but trust me, I hate it. I had to look up a tutorial on YouTube. That goes to show just how infamous this part is. I had to look up a tutorial to beat a tutorial. But I will say, hitting that perfect drift is electrifying. However, as I stated above, I hardly used any of the tricks the tutorial taught me. For example, when drifting, all you have to do is turn sharp enough and your car will automatically lose traction and drift on its own. This method is much more controllable and reliable than using square or triangle to drift. And I'd only ever do burnouts for fun, never in a chase or a time-sensitive mission because you spin out very easily while doing this. After the tutorial, you're tasked with getting to a bank within a specified time to drive a heist crew to safety. And this leads me to one of my first complaints about the game, which is the constant, obnoxious use of a timer. Unfortunately, most if not all missions follow this formula. On top of that, a lot of missions are very stingy with the time, so you have no margin of error. You better hope you don't crash or make a wrong turn. There are other things about the timer that confuse me, like this mission where you have to meet a contact at a strip club, and of course there's a timer. This mission is one of many that make me really question why a timer was even necessary in the first place. No one's coming to get him, his life isn't in peril, he essentially just said come hang out, all casual like. Or what about the missions where the timer counts up? I don't understand why it does this. What, am I gonna brag to my friends that it only took me 2 minutes and 53 seconds to get some criminals back to the crib in the San Francisco level in Driver 1? Who the fuck cares? If the timer isn't gonna go down, why even have it? But regardless of timers, the missions where you have to ram a car off the road are an absolute blast, but there are only I think 5, maybe 6 of them in the entire game, which is a shame because I would have loved to see more. But coming back to the story aspect, I constantly felt like I was missing something. Like, who's this lady with the afro, and why'd she kill this other guy in the next scene? The story feels so fragmented, and I was listening to and watching all the scenes, yet I still had no idea what was going on most of the time. I was in a perpetual state of, who are they? Why am I chasing them? Why are the cops chasing me? Not once did I feel as though I had a good grasp on the narrative. I blame the disconnect partially on the almost pitch black cutscenes where everyone is just a blocky silhouette and barely audible voicemails. While I'm on the topic, missions are conveyed through voicemails, which I guess makes sense, but I mean, for criminals, they sure divulge a lot of information over the phone. It wouldn't take much to bring this criminal enterprise down if I weren't already in the midst of doing so.
It's us. So listen, we want to use you on a bank job. No hassles. Should be real sleepy. You want in?
During your escapade to take down Castaldi, you'll visit and operate in 4 different cities: Miami, San Francisco, LA, and New York. They all have their own unique look and vibe. For example, Miami is slightly overcast and extremely flat. San Francisco is hilly and sun-drenched, and LA and New York are perpetually stormy and dark. One thing I have noticed is the lack of dynamics in the game world. What I mean by that is there isn't really anything exciting to these levels. This causes them to become very stale very quick. I would have loved it if there were more to the gameplay than just hold X, steer, avoid crash, avoid cop, escape cop. Complete mission. One saving grace is that the police aren't magically faster than you like they typically are in the GTA games. This makes the police chases fair, but it also means that during the vast majority of said chases, all you have to do to escape is hold X and drive straight. I'm not kidding either. There were many times during my playthrough where I was just sitting there holding X while scrolling on my phone. Not exactly riveting gameplay. How about some jumps? I mean, all we get are these wimpy dirt piles. Now this is a major missed opportunity in my opinion. I'm sure there was a reason to omit jumps from the game, but it would have felt amazing to just floor it just to see how far I could fly. Let's get back to the levels. Starting with Miami, one thing I noticed right away is that there isn't much going on in this level. I mean, it's just flat, and the bridges make the level feel very repetitive. They bottleneck the map to a point where you only have 2 options in which route you want to take to get to the other island. And more often than not, you don't have time to take the upper bridge, or the objective is closer to the other bridge. This means you're always driving on the same road to the objective, over and over. Maybe if there were a 3rd bridge or something, or a tunnel, it wouldn't be that bad, but as it stands, it's irritating and repetitive. Another issue I have, which goes hand in shitty hand with the bridges, and all levels have this to an extent, but Miami is the biggest culprit, is that you always start in the same alleyway unless it's a multi-part mission, which there aren't many of in this level anyway. This again means you'll be driving the same 4 or 5 roads for mostly all the missions. And this is made even worse considering that out of the 4 levels, Miami has the most missions. But don't worry, it's not all bad. There was this one really cool mission in Miami called Cash for Key. I don't really remember what you do in it, it's not that important either. What is important is that when the mission starts, it starts at night, and as you drive, the sun comes up. I loved this. It lends the world space some dynamics, something the game sorely lacks. This type of thing happens a few times throughout the game, but this mission is where I think it's done the best. After finishing up in Miami, you end up in San Francisco, and this level is a very frustrating group of narrow streets and alleys. Every single time I approach a corner, there's always a car that's about to push out into the intersection. Every single time. I'm just tearing it up, pedal to the metal, and out of nowhere, a dude in a taxi clips me, sending me flying straight into a wall or another car. The design of this level discourages you from flooring it most times, forcing you to take it slow, which naturally isn't too much fun. However, compared to Miami, San Francisco actually feels more like a city. The map has one major road cutting straight through the middle with blocks of buildings off either side. This means you have options in which route you want to take to your objectives, which is refreshing, especially after Miami. San Francisco also has this game's first mega bullshit mission, and it's this one where you have to drive a crate from point A to point B, which you think would be an easy task, right? Wrong. Police just come out of nowhere and ram the ever-living shit out of you. They do this even when you're not in an active pursuit. And of course, the box is very fragile. 2 or 3 good hits and it explodes. This mission took me 22 tries. I'm not kidding. 22. By the time it was over, I had to sit in a cold shower because I was sweating so much. The 3rd level is LA, and by the time I got here, I was kinda done with the game. the fatigue of driving straight for minutes at a time with no change was at an all-time high. It also doesn't help that this map's major areas are separated by incredibly long roads with yet again nothing to do or see, and every mission seems to have you driving from one end of the map to the other. This one where you have to pick up these hitmen is especially terrible. You go back and forth on boring dark roads. Having LA set at night during a storm is an interesting and unique design choice, one which I actually really liked in the beginning. The rain effects and reflections off the wet roads are a nice touch. The downside is that it's so incredibly dark at times that it's almost impossible to tell what you're doing. I was constantly hitting obstacles because I just couldn't see them. This alone caused more mission fails than I care to count. By about the 4th or 5th mission, my admiration for the time of day and weather turned to disdain, and I was ready to be done with the level. And finally, New York. And out of all the levels in the game, I think New York is the best one, at least from a layout perspective. It's much more complex than the others, offering you a lot of options in which route to take to your destination, but it still boils down to you just driving straight down the main road. Something I wasn't thrilled to find out is that New York, just like LA, is also dark and stormy. You know what, I'll go a step further and say that New York is worse than LA in this regard. It takes darkness to a whole new level, just see for yourself. How am I supposed to tell what I'm even doing here? And as you can probably guess, I often didn't know anything was in front of me till after I hit it. It also doesn't help that the streetlights in this game serve no purpose beyond being another obstacle for you to hit. If they don't emit light, why have them there in the first place? So New York has 2 mega bullshit missions. The first is called Trash Granger's Wheels. All you have to do is destroy a car, but the game absolutely chugs here and I can't see a foot in front of my car, and the cops just throw you around like a toddler in a bouncy castle. On the attempt where I finally completed it, the game spawned a police roadblock right in front of the arrow I had to stop at to complete the mission, so naturally I got another tail. Then I lost that tail, went back, got another tail, then the roadblock respawned. Then I almost died getting back. What an absolute nightmare. Driver, have some mercy. But the most infamous, most difficult, most bullshit mission I have ever had the misfortune of playing, even more bullshit than the tutorial, is called the President's Run. This mission is the unholy coupling of every bad design choice and flaw this game has in its putrid pockets. It's where adolescent dreams go to die. For those of you wondering what hell looks like, it might look like this mission. So basically, Castaldi wants to kill the president, so your job is to drive all the way across the map with him in your back seat in order to save his life. Seems simple enough, and looking at the map, you really don't have to go that far. Adding to that, the timer is going up, so awesome. It's looking like a pretty easy mission, right? Fuck no. You get hunted by not only police, but mobsters also. Oh, and by the way, they're way faster than you, so you can't even outrun them. And if you have to turn, say goodbye to half your health, because they will catch you and fuck you up the tailpipe. No matter what I did or which route I took, I could never get past the halfway mark. The cops just dogpile you and trap you. And when you finally manage to break free, there's another car careening towards you at top fucking speed. I even dropped the chase difficulty down to easy to see if I could beat it that way, and I got pretty close, but still, I must have tried another dozen times and couldn't even get close. So my guess is, I just got very lucky on that one attempt. I have no idea how you're supposed to beat this mission on medium, let alone hard. Fuck, screw this game, screw it to death. I'm just gonna watch the ending on YouTube. So, I was unable to beat the entire game myself, boo-hoo, but thanks to YouTube, I got to live vicariously through other content creators to experience the ending. In the end, Castaldi is arrested and your job is complete. But one thing that's really been bothering me about him is that he feels more like a generic crime boss or maybe a capo or underboss than the actual main big bad guy. He's very much hands-off for most of the story, so there isn't much that makes him out to be this evil big bad guy that needs to go down right now. Plus, spoiler alert, you don't even get to take him down yourself at the end. I mean, talk about blue balls. You complete the last mission and just like that, he's in jail. How disappointing. I would have loved a mission where you had to take him and a bunch of his cronies out in this big, high-speed, intense chase. I feel like that would have left me, the player, with an actual sense of satisfaction and closure. And honestly, after completing this frustrating mess of a story, I look back fondly on the tutorial. Seeing that this is a game all about cars and driving said cars, you'd think there would be some intriguing options and vehicles. Well, not really. Each of the 4 stages have their own dedicated vehicle for you to drive. They're all just generic dark muscle cars. There are a few missions that have you drive different vehicles like a truck or a cop car, but these instances are rare, which is a real shame. I would have liked it if we could choose a vehicle best suited to the level, time of day, weather, or mission. Driver 2 would, in a way, remedy this by allowing you to steal cars, a la GTA. But unfortunately, in this game, it seems like the doors of our cars are welded shut. And in terms of the driving itself, I'd say that it feels extremely floaty at times with the exaggerated suspension. This is especially bad in San Francisco. Going over the hills naturally makes your car bounce, and when your car bounces, it becomes uncontrollable, leading you to crash. Also, in LA and New York, somehow your car feels more unwieldy. I don't know if it's the in-game weather, the car, or the performance of the game, but it makes turning and flashy driving extremely difficult to pull off. As you may have gathered, this is only one of the many issues I had with those levels. The artificial intelligence in this game is pretty decent, with a few hiccups of course. For example, pedestrian cars merge and turn almost intentionally to mess you up. These traffic merges happen constantly and they merge very, very slowly. On Miami, it takes cars about a quarter of a mile to merge into the next lane, so this means you have to furiously dodge and weave through them. This alone almost becomes a game in itself. The police AI feels more dynamic than other games of the time, and for the most part you can avoid chases entirely, given your felony bar is empty and you follow the traffic rules. But if you run a red light, speed, or crash in front of them, they'll chase you down. And I was very surprised at how difficult escaping them was at times, while other times it was effortless. As I mentioned earlier, they don't magically gain super speed like the police in the GTA games tend to. For reference, I'm playing with the police difficulty set to the default setting, which is medium. There are 4 surefire ways to lose the cops when they do decide to chase you, and the best strategy to end a chase early is to just ram a cop car at the start of a chase. They don't have that much health and they're usually turning to try and stop you anyway, so it's easy and you take little damage doing so. Or you can always just nudge the police cars till they die. I use this cheese method more times than I can count. You just gotta have more health than the cop. And lastly, you can just weave through traffic. To my knowledge, the police just follow you in a straight line, so if you put an obstacle between you and them, more often than not, they'll hit it. Most of the time, swerving through traffic is a good strategy, and I say most because if the game is slowing down on you, you're more likely to crash anyway. In those cases, you're better off just driving straight. One thing's for certain though, police chases become annoying very quickly. Every block or so, a police car shows up out of nowhere and starts chasing you. It got to the point where every time I saw those flashing lights, I would just groan and roll my eyes. Driver has 6 minigames plus a free roam mode for you to play after you're done with the story, and I'll be honest, after playing through the story myself and almost beating it, I didn't even want to play these extra modes. I was still heated from the final mission. First, you have Take a Ride, which is simply free roam. You select a level and the time of day and you just go. The driving games, on the other hand, are a little more unique. There are 6 to choose from: Pursuit, Getaway, Crosstown Checkpoint, Trailblazer, Survival, and Dirt Track. They're mostly just variations of mission types from the main game. In Pursuit, you're chasing. In Getaway, you're escaping. In Survival, you're surviving. Crosstown Checkpoint is just a checkpoint chase. Trailblazer is more or less the same, but with flags. And finally, Dirt Track. In this one, you race against the clock on, you guessed it, a dirt track. This one is actually pretty alright, mostly due to the change of scenery. It just makes me think that a level with a desert theme would have been so cool. Definitely would have been a palate cleanser, that's for sure. That being said, none of these modes are particularly remarkable in any way. They just exist in case you want to play more Driver, which I guess is valid, but I would have preferred more story missions or another level to rip around in. I mentioned this earlier on in the video, but Driver was heavily inspired by chase scenes in old cop movies. And nowhere is this more apparent than with the film director mode. As the name states, this mode records your gameplay in the background, then allows you to take that footage and play around with camera angles and placement for a more cinematic clip. So here's just the clip. And here's the same clip after about an hour in the film director mode. Yeah, it serves little purpose in terms of gameplay, but it's a neat inclusion, one which I actually like a lot. This mode would appear across most of the titles in the franchise, and later on, when graphics started getting better and more complex, this mode only got better, but for now, it's not something I'd spend too much time in. Now, I know I've kind of been shitting all over this game, but I'll give credit where it's due. The sound design and driver is pretty solid. I mean, I don't recommend playing the PS1 version with a headset for too long or you'll get a migraine, but the sound of your tires screeching during a drift, police sirens during a pursuit, or that satisfying crunch of a collision are all great in my books. Another thing I like is the visual damage vehicles take on after a collision. Back in the day, it was always awesome to see how a crash would affect the appearance of your car. I know things like this are commonplace now, but back then it wasn't extremely common or done this well. And of course, who could forget your hubcaps falling off at every turn? This little detail alone is a core memory of the Driver series for me. I used to rip around as a kid just to see how long I could keep all 4 of them on. But for every good thing in this game, there's a bad thing just to keep the scales balanced. For example, some of the multi-part missions don't repair your car between parts. This makes sense, but from a gameplay standpoint, it's still annoying. If you were too reckless in one part, it would make subsequent parts way harder than they had any right to be. I had a hell of a time with this 3-part mission in New York. I took a few bad hits in the second part, which left me with about 20% of my health bar. In the third part, you're getting chased down by who I can only assume are FBI? They drive very fast black cars and pop up out of nowhere, and with New York's dark color palette, they blend in very well. This led me to think about artificial difficulty in games. The difficulty in this game is achieved by spawning police vehicles or bad guys directly in front of you at every turn, which is okay I guess, but feels fake or artificial. While on the topic, I was playing GTA 4 the other day and that game employs the same tactic, only in that game it's less egregious because the police don't really care if you speed or run a red light, so it's not nearly as bad. Another gripe I have with Driver is the draw distance. This was an issue for me through my entire playthrough. You have a small bubble, or chunk, that loads in around your car. Now this is commonplace, it's done even in today's games but done way better. In Driver however, this chunk is so small that it takes away from any feeling that you're actually in a city. And I know it's an old game and all, but the way the environment just pops in around you is very harsh. Accompanying the pop-in are frequent frame drops and severe slowdown. All my gameplay was captured on a PS2, so you'd assume the slowdowns wouldn't be this bad. And because this game is very physics oriented, the frame drops completely change how the game plays. Some parts are very difficult due to this. It's hard to tell on video, but believe me, when you're playing you can really tell when the game is performing as intended and when it's not. Take the port area on the Miami level for example. Everything becomes really snappy and responsive in this area, so driving becomes really fun and easy. However, this is a double-edged sword. The game underperforms so much and so often, you become accustomed to it. Then the odd time the game decides to work as intended, it really throws you off. My last complaint, and I know this is a nitpick, but saving is a whole bullshit ordeal. First, the game scans your memory card, right? File by file. This wasn't really an issue for me as my memory card was basically empty, but I could only imagine how bad it was back in the day where you'd have a nearly full card. And then you select your driver stage. If you choose to overwrite your existing save, you gotta rename the file, which is just annoying as fuck. You should just be able to hit overwrite and boom, it's done. Then it scans your memory card again. This annoyed me so much to the point where I just wouldn't save, and actually resulted in me having to replay a chunk of the game. Just let me quick save, demon. Okay, so let's recap. Driver is a game that makes so many strides towards greatness, but kneecaps itself at every turn. Every time I felt like the game was getting fun, there was something right there seemingly designed to be annoying. Out of all the issues this game has, I think its biggest one is, for me at least, the performance. Constant slowdowns and chunks of the city harshly popping in front of me really took away from the vibe of it all. Driver really is a mixed bag for me. On one hand, I'm glad I remember it, but on the other, I probably won't ever play it again. But what about all of you? Did any of you remember Driver? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Or could you even get past the tutorial? Let me know in the comments. And a big thanks to everyone for helping me reach 360 subscribers. I know that's not a huge milestone relative to other channels, but it is to me, and I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for watching, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in the next one.